The desert stretched endlessly beneath a white sun, dunes rolling like frozen waves beneath a sky too wide for comfort, and along a rarely used transport route that cut through the sands like a scar. A long-haul cargo truck roared forward in a cloud of dust, its engine humming with steady resilience as Daniel Mercer adjusted his cracked sunglasses and squinted at the shimmering horizon ahead, expecting nothing more dramatic than another overheating radiator or a blown tire in the middle of nowhere, because that was the nature of his job. Deliver supplies between isolated mining settlements and keep moving no matter what the desert threw at him. But fate has a way of placing the extraordinary directly in the path of the ordinary, and as he crested a high ridge of sand, something pale and unmoving at the base of the next dune caught his attention. A shape that did not belong among the gold and amber landscape. Not bone, not stone, not debris, but something too smooth, too deliberate. In its stillness, an instinct made him ease off the accelerator despite the risk of getting stuck in soft sand. He told himself it was probably scrap metal reflecting sunlight, yet as he rolled closer, heart thudding with cautious curiosity, the shape shifted slightly, revealing not metal but scales, white scales, almost luminous against the desert floor, and suddenly Daniel realized he was staring at a dragon hatchling, small, curled tightly into itself as if trying to disappear, its wings folded awkwardly along a thin frame that trembled beneath the heat, its horns underdeveloped and pale as ivory, its eyes closed as though it had accepted invisibility as survival, and Daniel's breath caught because dragons were not myths in this world. They were apex predators of the mountain territories far beyond the dunes. Rarely seen near human trade routes and certainly never alone, especially not hatchlings, and yet this one sat abandoned in a place where even scavengers struggled to endure. He killed the engine, silence crashing over the desert except for wind scraping across sand, and for a long moment he simply remained behind the wheel, rational thought battling compassion, because everyone knew albino hatchlings were considered ill-omened among dragon clans. Whispers carried through settlements told stories of pale-born young rejected for weakness, believed unable to channel flame properly, seen as burdens in a society that valued strength and dominance. But knowing the rumor and seeing the reality were entirely different things, and when the hatchling finally opened its eyes, revealing irises not fiery gold but a soft, uncertain silver, Daniel felt something inside him shift irreversibly. The creature did not snarl or bare teeth, did not spread its wings to threaten. Instead it lowered its gaze as though expecting stones instead of help, and that quiet resignation struck harder than any roar could have. So Daniel stepped out of the truck slowly, boots sinking into hot sand, hands raised not in surrender but in openness. Speaking in a calm voice he used on nervous horses back home. "Hey there, I'm not here to hurt you." Unsure whether dragons understood human speech yet compelled to offer reassurance anyway, and the hatchling flinched at the sound, trying weakly to stand, legs wobbling beneath a body too dehydrated to support itself, collapsing back into the dune with a soft rasp that sounded heartbreakingly like defeat. Daniel approached carefully, noticing abrasions along the young dragon's flank, marks not from predators but from claws larger than its own. Discipline, rejection, exile, and anger flickered through him at the thought of a clan casting out its own blood beneath a merciless sun, leaving it to perish quietly so nature could erase the inconvenience, and he crouched several feet away, pulling a canteen from his belt, pouring a little water into the lid and sliding it across the sand. Unsure whether dragons drank the same way mammals did but unwilling to do nothing, and after several tense seconds the hatchling lifted its head cautiously, nostrils twitching, then crawled forward inch by inch until its tongue flicked out hesitantly to taste the offering, silver eyes widening slightly at the cool relief before it drank more eagerly, fragile throat working with desperation. Daniel swallowed hard, knowing water alone would not be enough, knowing regulations strictly forbade interference with dragon affairs, knowing that transporting a dragon, especially an unregistered albino, could result in confiscation of his vehicle or worse. Yet, as the hatchling finished the last drop and looked up at him not with trust but with confused disbelief, as if kindness were an unfamiliar language, the decision crystallized without ceremony. He removed his work jacket and draped it gently over the trembling body to shield it from the sun, surprised at how light the creature felt when he carefully slid his arms beneath it, mindful of folded wings and delicate bones, and though dragons were known for heat radiating from within, this one felt cooler than expected, its internal fire diminished or perhaps never fully formed, and Daniel carried it toward the truck with steady steps, aware that if an adult dragon appeared overhead he would stand no chance of explaining himself, yet the sky remained vast and empty, offering no intervention. He settled the hatchling on the passenger seat atop a folded blanket, adjusting the air vents to circulate cooler air from the cabin system, and when he closed the door and circled back to the driver's side, the small dragon had not attempted escape, instead curling into the fabric as though exhausted beyond resistance, watching him with wary curiosity, and Daniel restarted the engine, glancing sideways at his unexpected companion as the truck rumbled forward once more, leaving behind the dune that might have become a grave. Miles passed in thoughtful silence, broken only by the hum of tires over hardened sand, and Daniel considered his options. Turn back toward the nearest settlement and report the find, risking the hatchling being handed over to authorities who might see it as a political inconvenience, or continue toward the frontier outpost where rumors spoke of a veterinarian rumored to treat unusual species without prejudice. And while logic insisted the first option was safer for him, something deeper insisted the second was right for the dragon, because strength was not always measured by flame or dominance. Sometimes it was measured by survival against abandonment, and he glanced again at the pale figure now dozing lightly, chest rising and falling in fragile rhythm, and imagined what kind of world declared such a creature unworthy simply for being different. As dusk began to paint the desert in hues of crimson and violet, the hatchling stirred, lifting its head slowly to peer through the windshield at the fading sun, and for the first time Daniel noticed a faint shimmer gathering along the creature's scales. Not bright like typical dragonfire, but subtle, almost prismatic, catching twilight in quiet defiance. And he wondered if perhaps the clans had misjudged what kind of power this hatchling carried, mistaking unfamiliarity for deficiency, because humanity had done that before in its own history, casting aside those who did not fit established molds, only to later realize that innovation often arrived wrapped in indifference. The dragon's gaze met his again, less fearful now, and though no words passed between them, something like understanding settled in the cabin. A silent agreement forged on a stretch of road no one else would remember, and Daniel adjusted his route toward the frontier lights flickering faintly on the horizon, fully aware that by choosing to stop in the dunes, he had altered not only the fate of a rejected hatchling but potentially his own as well, because sometimes the most powerful acts are not grand battles or heroic speeches, but a simple decision to notice what others ignore and to offer shelter where the world offered none. Night settled over the desert like a cooling breath, and the highway stretched ahead in a ribbon of dim headlights and distant stars as Daniel adjusted his route toward the frontier outpost of Red Mesa, the only settlement within 200 miles rumored to tolerate unusual cargo without too many questions. Beside him, the albino hatchling remained curled in his jacket, though its silver eyes no longer held the dull glaze of surrender. Instead, they tracked movement with cautious awareness, studying the passing darkness beyond the windshield as though memorizing a world it had never been allowed to explore. Daniel kept one hand loosely on the wheel and the other resting near the gearshift, hyper-aware of every unusual vibration from the engine. Smuggling was not his trade. He transported mining equipment, spare machine parts, sometimes livestock. Never dragons. Certainly not clan-rejected albinos whose very existence carried political tension between dragon territories and human settlements. "You're full of surprises," he muttered softly, glancing sideways. The hatchling tilted its head slightly, as if recognizing tone rather than words. After an hour, Daniel noticed something else: heat. Not the overwhelming furnace warmth adult dragons radiated, but a gentle rise in cabin temperature concentrated near the passenger seat. He reached cautiously toward the hatchling's side without touching, feeling a faint pulse in the air, like warmth rising from sunlit stone. The dragon shifted uncomfortably. His breathing grew uneven. Daniel frowned. "Hey, easy." He pulled the truck onto the shoulder and switched on interior lights. Up close, he could see faint fractures of light flickering beneath the albino scales. Not red or gold like typical dragonfire, but soft iridescent streaks, shifting colors like oil across water. The glow pulsed erratically, then dimmed, then flared again. "Not good," Daniel murmured. He remembered something he'd once heard from an old mechanic who claimed to have worked near dragon territories. Hatchlings regulate internal fire through proximity to their brood. Isolation could destabilize that balance. This one had been alone for days, maybe longer. The flickering intensified suddenly, and the hatchling let out a sharp, strained cry, not loud, but piercing enough to make Daniel's chest tighten. Without thinking, he removed the jacket fully and placed his bare hand gently against the dragon's side. The heat spiked, but instead of burning him, it felt like standing too close to a heater, uncomfortable but tolerable. The hatchling froze at the contact. Silver eyes locked onto his. Daniel didn't pull away. "Breathe," he said quietly, unsure whether dragons understood the concept but saying it anyway. "You're not alone now." The flickering beneath the scales slowed. The iridescent glow steadied into a soft, consistent shimmer. Minutes passed. Gradually, the temperature normalized. The hatchling exhaled a shaky breath and lowered its head, pressing lightly into Daniel's palm. Relief washed through him. "So that's it," he whispered. "You don't need fire. You need connection." As if in response, the glow beneath its scales brightened slightly. Controlled this time, not chaotic. Daniel leaned back slowly, heart still racing. If dragon clans rejected albinos because their fire behaved differently, perhaps they had misunderstood the nature of that difference entirely. This wasn't destructive flame. It was responsive energy. It reacted to presence, to contact, to emotion. The implications unsettled him. If dragons valued independence and dominance, a hatchling whose power amplified through closeness might be seen as weakness. But what if it wasn't weakness at all? He restarted the engine and continued toward Red Mesa, more determined than ever. An hour later, flashing lights appeared in the rearview mirror. Daniel swore under his breath. Frontier Patrol. He eased the truck to a stop as two enforcement vehicles pulled up behind him, dust swirling in their beams. The hatchling stiffened instantly, body tensing. "It's okay," Daniel whispered. "Stay still." An officer approached his window, hand resting casually near a sidearm. "Evening," the officer said. "Routine inspection. We've had reports of unusual activity near Dragon borders." Daniel forced calm into his expression. "Just hauling parts to Red Mesa. Mind if we take a look?" He did mind, but refusing would guarantee suspicion. "Go ahead." The officer circled toward the passenger side. Daniel's pulse hammered in his ears. The hatchling lay motionless beneath the jacket, though Daniel could feel faint warmth radiating across the cab. The officer opened the passenger door. For a split second, the jacket shifted. Silver eyes met human eyes. Time seemed to stall. The officer inhaled sharply, but not in alarm. In confusion. The hatchling did not hiss, did not flare. Instead, it blinked slowly. The faint prismatic glow beneath its scales pulsed once, soft and mesmerizing, like moonlight refracted through crystal. The officer's rigid posture eased involuntarily. Daniel noticed it immediately. The man's expression softened, tension draining from his shoulders. "You transporting a dragon?" he asked quietly. Daniel chose honesty. "I found it in the dunes. Alone." The officer studied the hatchling again. It tilted its head, gaze steady and almost gentle. The faint glow shimmered once more. The officer stepped back slowly, closing the passenger door with unexpected care. He returned to Daniel's window. "You didn't see anything out there," the officer said after a long pause. Daniel blinked. "I'm sorry. You didn't see anything," the officer repeated calmly. "And neither did we." Understanding dawned. The hatchling's power. It wasn't force. It was influence. Not control, but empathy, perhaps amplified beyond normal boundaries. The officer gave a small nod. "Get to Red Mesa." Quietly. Daniel swallowed. "Thank you." As the patrol vehicles pulled away, Daniel glanced sideways at his passenger. "You did that, didn't you?" The hatchling shifted slightly, almost sheepish. The glow faded to a faint shimmer. Daniel exhaled slowly, rejected for lacking fire, when in truth it carried something far rarer. Not flame that destroyed, but presence that soothed. Connection that altered hostility without violence. As Red Mesa's distant lights grew brighter against the horizon, Daniel felt the weight of what he carried. Not just a fragile life, but a possibility neither species fully understood yet. And somewhere far beyond the desert, in territories where dragons ruled their skies, ancient instincts might already be stirring. Because powers rooted in empathy are often mistaken for weakness, until the world realizes they can reshape it entirely. Red Mesa looked like a scattering of stubborn lights clinging to the edge of civilization. Metal rooftops glinting under flood lamps and wind turbines turning lazily against the desert night. It was a place built by people who preferred distance, from governments, from dragon politics, from anything that required permission. If there was anywhere Daniel could arrive with an albino hatchling and not immediately lose it to bureaucracy, this was it. He rolled the truck through the main strip, tires crunching over gravel, and parked behind a weathered building marked Frontier Veterinary and Mechanical, a dual-purpose operation run by a woman named Mara Kessler, who believed engines and living creatures both deserved second chances. The hatchling stirred as the engine cut off. "We're here," Daniel said quietly. Silver eyes blinked up at him, alert but no longer panicked. He stepped out, circled around, and opened the passenger door carefully. This time the hatchling didn't shrink away. It allowed him to lift it, wings folding instinctively against its slender body. Inside the clinic, bright lights hummed overhead. Mara looked up from a workbench, wiping grease from her hands. She froze mid-motion when she saw what Daniel carried. "You've got to be kidding me," she said under her breath. "Found it in the dunes," Daniel replied. "Alone." Mara approached slowly, eyes narrowing as she examined the pale scales. "Albino," she muttered. "I've heard of rejections. Never seen one up close." The hatchling tensed at her proximity. Daniel felt the faint warmth flicker beneath its scales again. "Easy," he murmured. Mara noticed the shimmer immediately. "That's not typical." "I figured." She gestured toward an examination table reinforced with alloy plating. "Set it down gently." Daniel obeyed. Mara ran diagnostic scans with a handheld device, checking internal temperature, bone density, respiratory rhythm. The readings scrolled across her tablet, and her expression shifted from clinical detachment to fascination. "This isn't defective," she said quietly. "It's different." "How?" She turned the screen toward him. "Its core temperature doesn't spike like standard dragonfire patterns. Instead, it stabilizes in response to external proximity. It's reactive." "Reactive how?" "To emotion, to biological signals." She glanced at him meaningfully. "When you're near, its vitals regulate." Daniel absorbed that slowly. "So the clans rejected it because they thought it was weak." "More likely because they didn't understand it," Mara corrected. "Dragon society values independence. Power that relies on connection probably scares them." The hatchling shifted and looked between them, as if aware it was the subject of evaluation. Suddenly, a deep vibration rolled through the building. Both humans froze. Outside, wind patterns shifted unnaturally. Mara moved to the window and swore softly. Silhouettes circled above Red Mesa. Large ones. Daniel's stomach dropped. "They tracked it." "Of course they did," Mara said. "Dragons don't abandon blood without watching what happens next." A massive shape descended beyond the settlement's water tower, sand exploding outward upon landing. Smaller figures followed, forming a perimeter, not attacking but unmistakably claiming presence. The hatchling stiffened. The glow beneath its scales flared brighter than ever before. Not chaotic, but intense. Daniel placed a steadying hand against its side. The light steadied. "They're not burning anything," Mara observed carefully. "They're waiting," Daniel said. A thunderous knock rattled the clinic's outer door. Not wood against knuckles, claw against steel. Daniel exchanged a glance with Mara. "Well," she muttered. "Guess diplomacy just arrived." He stepped outside alone. The desert night felt electric. Before him stood a towering dragon with scales the color of sun-bleached sandstone, eyes sharp and ancient, scars traced along its neck, marks of dominance, of authority. Behind it, several others remained poised but restrained. The leader lowered its massive head until one golden eye aligned with Daniel. "You carry what was cast aside," The dragon's voice resonated. Not spoken aloud, but pressed into the air like distant thunder. Daniel swallowed but didn't step back. It was dying. It was unfit. It was alone, Daniel corrected evenly. The dragon's gaze sharpened. Albino hatchlings fail trials. Their fire is unreliable. Your fire measures destruction, Daniel replied carefully. Maybe you're measuring the wrong thing. A ripple of tension moved through the dragons behind the leader. The sandstone dragon exhaled slowly, warm air sweeping across the ground. You presume knowledge of our kind. I know what I saw, Daniel said. It didn't need dominance. It needed presence. Behind him, the clinic door opened slightly. The hatchling stepped out onto the threshold. Every dragon in the clearing went still. The albino walked forward hesitantly, silver eyes reflecting starlight. Its scales shimmered, not bright flame, but soft, prismatic waves that pulsed outward gently. The effect was immediate. The desert wind calmed. The tension in the air eased. Even the aggressive posture of the surrounding dragons softened unconsciously. The leader's pupils narrowed. The glow intensified, not blinding, not violent, but expansive. It washed across the clearing like quiet resonance. Daniel felt it too, a sense of clarity, of shared awareness. The sandstone dragon inhaled sharply. This is not weakness, it murmured. The hatchling approached the leader and stopped a few feet away. It did not bow. It did not challenge. It simply stood. The glow pulsed again. The older dragon's rigid stance faltered, just slightly. For a brief moment, something ancient flickered behind its stern expression. Memory of early hatchling days, of warmth shared in a brood before competition hardened instincts. The glow faded gradually. Silence stretched across the desert. Finally, the leader spoke. Power that binds rather than burns. Daniel exhaled slowly. Yeah. The dragon lifted its head, studying the settlement beyond. You would shelter it? Yes. You understand the consequences? Other clans will view this as interference. Daniel met the ancient gaze without flinching. Then let them. A low rumble passed through the assembled dragons, not hostile, but contemplative. The leader looked down at the hatchling once more. You were cast aside because we feared what we could not categorize, it said quietly. The hatchling tilted its head. The dragon turned back to Daniel. Humans once feared dragons for similar reasons. Daniel allowed himself a small, tired smile. We're still working on that. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, unexpectedly, the sandstone dragon stepped aside. Not surrender. Allowance. The albino will not be hunted, the leader declared. It will be observed. Daniel nodded slowly. Fair. The dragon's massive wings unfurled, catching starlight. But know this, human driver. If this hatchling reshapes the balance among our kind, history will mark this night. Daniel glanced down at the small dragon beside him, its pale scales glowing faintly in quiet defiance of every expectation placed upon it. History can do what it wants, he replied. I just stopped the truck. The leader studied him one last time. Then, with a powerful beat of wings, it rose into the night sky. One by one, the others followed. The desert fell silent again. Daniel looked down at the hatchling. It looked back. Neither of them fully understood what had begun. Only that rejection had not been the end of its story. It had been the beginning of something dragons had never considered possible. By sunrise, Red Mesa was no longer just a forgotten outpost on the edge of the dunes. It had become a line drawn in history. Word spread faster than desert wind. Not through human radio towers or official channels, but through dragon flight paths. The clans had not attacked. They had not reclaimed the albino hatchling. They had declared observation. Among dragons, that was monumental. Daniel stood outside the clinic as dawn painted the sand in pale gold. The hatchling sat beside him on the truck hood, small claws gripping warm metal, silver eyes watching the horizon where the sandstone leader had vanished hours earlier. You've caused a stir, Daniel murmured. The hatchling scales shimmered faintly in response. Not agitated, Not unstable, simply alive. Behind them, Mara stepped out carrying a tablet. "You're trending," she said dryly. Daniel blinked. "Excuse me?" Satellite images picked up the dragon gathering. Frontier networks are already speculating. Human shelters rejected hatchling. Albino anomaly. Potential clan fracture. Take your pick. Daniel exhaled slowly. That was fast. Dragons circling a settlement usually means fire, Mara replied. This time it meant restraint. That's new. The hatchling shifted and nudged Daniel's arm gently. Its glow pulsed once, soft, outward. Across the settlement, subtle reactions followed. Two mechanics arguing near a fuel pump lowered their voices unconsciously. A nervous rancher who had been pacing since the dragon arrival paused, shoulders relaxing. Even the restless desert wind seemed to soften. Mara noticed it too. "It's expanding," she said quietly. "Not expanding," Daniel corrected after a moment. "Connecting." Overhead, a shadow passed. But this time only one dragon descended. Not the sandstone leader. Another. Younger, sleeker, scales bronze with streaks of charcoal. It landed at the edge of town without aggression, folding its wings carefully. Residents froze but did not run. The bronze dragon lowered its head slightly toward Daniel and the hatchling. "We request demonstration," it said, voice resonating through the still air. Daniel looked down at the albino. "You up for visitors?" The hatchling tilted its head, then hopped lightly from the truck hood to the ground. It walked forward alone. The bronze dragon watched intently. "Show us," it urged. The hatchling paused several feet away. For a moment nothing happened. Then the faint prismatic glow brightened. Not blinding, not forceful. It rippled outward like gentle waves across water. Daniel felt it first. A sensation like warmth spreading beneath his ribs, clearing tension he hadn't realized he carried. The bronze dragon inhaled sharply. Behind it, at the horizon, more silhouettes appeared, watching but keeping distance. The glow expanded further. A group of settlers who had gathered nearby visibly relaxed. Fear lines smoothed, breathing slowed, suspicion softened into cautious wonder. The bronze dragon lowered itself instinctively, forelegs bending. Not in submission, but in reflection. "This is influence without domination," it murmured. The hatchling's glow pulsed again. The bronze dragon's eyes widened slightly. "It magnifies what already exists," it said slowly. "Calm becomes deeper. Curiosity becomes stronger. Hostility weakens." Daniel nodded. "It doesn't control. It amplifies." The bronze dragon studied the hatchling with new understanding. "Our clans rejected what we misread as dependency." Mara crossed her arms. "Seems like you rejected your own evolution." The dragon did not react defensively. Instead, it turned its gaze toward the growing number of dragons visible along the dunes. "They watch because change unsettles tradition," it said. The hatchling's glow softened, returning to a steady shimmer. Daniel stepped forward. "It doesn't belong to us," he said evenly. "Not to humans, not to clans. It deserves choice." The bronze dragon's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Choice is not granted lightly among our kind." "Maybe that's the problem," Mara muttered. Silence stretched. Wind moved softly across sand. Finally, the bronze dragon straightened. "Then let this be recorded," it declared, voice carrying across the dunes. "The albino hatchling is not defective. It is divergent. Its power does not fracture unity. It strengthens it." Murmurs of deep resonance rolled from the distant dragons. Not unanimous agreement, but not rejection either. The bronze dragon looked down at Daniel. "You intervened when instinct told you to ignore." Daniel shrugged slightly. "I stopped the truck. That act altered more than one life." The hatchling stepped closer to the bronze dragon and gently pressed its forehead against the larger scale. The prismatic glow flared once, stronger than before. In the distance, several dragons shifted position, their silhouettes lowering slightly, not dominance but contemplation. Something subtle changed in the desert air. Not dramatic, Not explosive, but foundational. The bronze dragon lifted its wings. "We will not reclaim it," it announced. "We will observe and learn." With a powerful beat, it rose into the morning sky. The distant watchers followed, dispersing slowly rather than retreating abruptly. Red Mesa exhaled collectively. Daniel looked down at the hatchling. "Well," he said softly, "guess you're not rejected anymore." The small dragon blinked up at him. Its glow warmed gently, no longer flickering with instability but steady as sunrise. Mara stepped beside him. "You realize this makes Red Mesa a neutral ground now," she said. "Dragons will come. Humans will come. Everyone will want to see the anomaly." Daniel nodded. "Then we build something better than fear." He crouched beside the hatchling. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. The albino tilted its head, considering. Then it did something simple. It walked back to the truck and sat beside it. Daniel smiled. "Guess I've got a co-driver." The hatchling chirped softly. Above them, dragons traced wide arcs across the sky. Not as predators, not as rulers, but as witnesses to a shift they had not anticipated. A rejected hatchling had sat alone in the dunes, left to disappear. Instead, a human had noticed, had stopped, had chosen connection over caution, and in doing so, had revealed that strength is not always measured in flame or dominance. Sometimes it is measured in the quiet power to bring others closer without forcing them at all. The desert would remember that. So would the dragons. And this time, when something different was born beneath their skies, they would look twice before turning away.